Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this very special event, Making Europe Great Again, How Hungary's Presidency is Changing Europe Today. My name is Lillian Zsófia Aronson, and I will be your host. While the 6-month Hungarian presidency of the Council of the European Union ended at the end of December 2024, its impact could resonate for years to come. For one, the presidency's critical approach to the current problems faced by the EU, because let's face it, there are plenty, built momentum for change, gaining further support from the Draghi report and political changes across the Atlantic. The goal of this event, co-organized by the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs and the Danube Institute, is to bring together policymakers and analysts to share their insights on what the presidency meant for Europe and where we go from here. We will start the day with a warm welcome from the leadership of both of our institutes, followed by a discussion with Minister for European Union Affairs János Bóka, and then a panel discussion with other experts. We will end the event with a standing reception. So, let's begin by welcoming Gladon Papin, President of the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs, to give his welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Good morning, Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I was just reflecting on the Hungarian presidency of the Council of the EU in preparation for this event, and a couple of features in particular stand out to me in retrospect. And the first is what a unique situation of general political uncertainty the presidency was undertaken under. This was a period right after the European elections, during which the European Commission wasn't yet formed and was in the process of being formed. And also there was a big question hovering on the other side of the Atlantic about what direction the US would take in the upcoming years and how that would potentially affect the European Union and its member states. The second feature, I think, that was particularly notable about the Hungarian presidency was that in its substantive viewpoint, it was something a little bit different from a typical cyclical or rotational presidency. It was the opportunity for Hungary to put forward, in frankly an atmosphere of sometimes intense international criticism and skepticism of the Hungarian viewpoint, for it to put forward a distinctive and even alternative vision of the recipe for success of the European Union. And I think in retrospect, finding a way to articulate those priorities in this situation of uncertainty and in a distinct way has proven quite successful. I think that in many ways what Hungary offered during that period was an alternative recipe for the success of the European Union, and along with that, an opportunity for carving out a different viewpoint on the international stage. In the month that has passed, month and a half that's passed since the conclusion of the presidency, it's now clear that we have entered into some yet new era of global politics, and the global order as we knew it seems once again to be changing. This is the best possible news that we experts in international affairs could hope for, because it gives us much to talk about and illuminates many aspects of the Hungarian presidency in retrospect. Hungary's presidency was guided by a vision of a strong, sovereign and competitive Europe, and that idea has, I think, gained increasing recognition on the global stage. The challenges that are facing Europe today, its economic stagnation, or if not stagnation, at least sideways movement, its insufficient defense capabilities, its lack of clarity when it comes to its geopolitical vision, require a pragmatic and strategic approach, and it turns out that the recipe that Hungary was offering throughout the fall is quite relevant, particularly in today's circumstances. The Hungarian presidency prioritized, of course, competitiveness, advocating for cutting red tape, fostering innovation, and strengthening Europe's industrial base, principles that are now echoed by many European leaders and which seem all the more important and relevant on the international stage. Hungary's commitment to enlargement, particularly in the Western Balkans, has also helped to reinvigorate discussions on merit-based expansion, clarifying what Hungary sees as the essence of European Union membership and the path toward it. And in so doing, Hungary brought substantive and tangible momentum to the process. Recognizing also the need for stronger European defenses, Hungary pushed for improved defense capabilities and investment, and today this is increasingly becoming a policy priority across the continent. It's also remarkable to see how many of these themes offer a path for Europe to respond to the challenges that are being presented by the new US administration's vision. The whole world could witness just a short time ago in Munich that the new American vice president addressed a group of astonished European policymakers with a message that in many ways echoed the core themes of the Hungarian presidency, if not certainly in a simple way, since that's not what it was articulating, nevertheless presenting a picture to which the Hungarian presidency offered a strong response. Europe must regain its competitive edge, must take more responsibility for its own security, and it must act in its own best interests rather than having its understanding of values constrained by recent ideological developments. These were all themes of the vice president's speech, and somehow they echo or relate to, even if not in a simple or straightforward way, the themes of the Hungarian presidency. So it's encouraging to see that there is a new framework on offer coming out of the Hungarian presidency for making clear what a strong path for Europe could be in the coming years. There's now also a greater emphasis on peace, stability, and transatlantic cooperation that would support a stronger and more competitive Europe, and this shift offers a real opportunity for Europe to reinforce its position on the global stage. Hungary's presidency provided a clear roadmap for addressing these challenges, and it's pleasing to see that the Hungarian vision, which has many times had to fight its way into public discourse, actually offers a distinct positive contribution that now is even more timely than it was when the presidency concluded. I'm proud, finally, that in our own way, the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs has been able to contribute to these efforts by publishing its handbook on the Hungarian EU presidency, and we hope it will serve both as a record of our efforts, the efforts of the presidency, and also will be a guide for the future. Finally, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Danube Institute for hosting and co-organizing the event. Just as Hungary's presidency continues to shape the future of the continent, I'm confident that the next 2 hours will also offer invaluable insights contributing to a stronger and more competitive Europe. So thank you very much. And now we'll have some comments from the Danube Institute.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pappen. I now invite Callum Nicholson, Research Director at the Danube Institute, to give his welcoming remarks.
Köszönöm szépen, jó reggelt. Good morning. My name is Callum Nicholson. I'm Director of Research at the Danube Institute. I'm actually standing in for István Kiss, our Executive Director, who sadly can't be here today. He sends his apologies. So we're very honored to be hosting this today, and particularly the Minister. Thank you for coming. Obviously, the slogan for the Hungarian presidency was mega, and it's sometimes easy to look at these slogans as just political and particularly mega as it make Europe great again. It can sometimes come across as a sort of nostalgic or romantic slogan in some ways, but it's worth reminding us that when we talk about making Europe great again, It's not harking back to the 19th century or something nostalgic or romantic. Europe's drop-off has been quite dramatic in the last 15 years. In 2008, the European economy and the American economy were neck and neck. Today, the American economy is worth 25.5 trillion and the European 15.6. It's 60% the size of the American economy. And then why is this? Well, in the last 15 years, the US has chosen competitiveness over regulation, whereas Europe has chosen risk aversion over growth, and this has had long-term impacts across virtually all sectors, not least defense. This is one example of some of the results of some surveys now. If you look at tech workers, 90% of Europe's tech workers would take a job in the US for the right offer. In the US, tech salaries are 50% higher than their equivalents in the UK, and startup funding in the US is 5 times higher. In the US, it is 5 times higher than in the EU. So, quite apart from its substantive accomplishments, Hungary in its presidency of the Council of the EU actually set about changing, I think, the tone and tenor of the debate, expanding the Overton window of what is seen as valid topics of discussion. And I think we need to understand that sometimes the spirit matters as much as the letter of what is being said. And across the board, and as so often has been the case in the last 10 years, Hungary's suggestions met by howls of derision in Brussels proved actually to be somewhat ahead of the curve. Much like on migration, which took a few years for everyone else to catch up on Hungary's perspective and to recognize some of the wisdom in it, in the wake of the presidency, we've very quickly seen the presidency, of course, highlighted a need for competitiveness, stronger defense, and to put geopolitical realism over idealism. We've seen this validated very quickly by, as you mentioned, J.D. Vance's recent speech in Munich, really admonishing Europe to adopt the same values and positions. There's a quote from George Bernard Shaw in his 1928 play, The Apple Cart, and he wrote, "One man that has a mind and knows it can beat 10 men who haven't and don't." And I've been living in Hungary for 4 years. It's a relatively small country, but I think its advantage is it does have a mind and know it. And I think this is where it has its real potential to impact the course of policy across the broader EU and beyond. And so in the spirit of this, I'm very pleased to say on behalf of the Danube Institute, and also Melissa O'Sullivan is also here, that we're very pleased to be hosting this jointly with MKI, and we look forward to the discussions today. Thank you very much.
We are now incredibly fortunate to have with us the Minister for European Union Affairs himself to assess the 2024 Hungarian presidency and its quest for a more sober European politics. Please welcome János Bóka, Minister for European Union Affairs, and Ákos Mernyei, Advisor to the President at the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to each and any of you. And first, let me say thank you for accepting our invitation to this presidency assessment discussion and starting your week with a topic most probably many of you finished your last evening with, the issues the EU faces. Special thanks to Minister Bóka for taking the time for sharing his thoughts with us on these topics. For those who follow your numerous abroad activities, Minister, it is clear that to catch you in Hungary for a conference is not an easy task, so thank you very much again. This also suggests that although the Hungarian presidency has come to an end in December administratively, the spirit of the Hungarian presidency did not finish. One could also argue that as the popular Hungarian song goes, the night can never come to an end, az éjjel soha nem érhet véget, that the same is true for the political mindset and contest which were either started or established by the Hungarian presidency. The result is that the face-off between the liberal forces who want to continue their business-as-usual model in Brussels and the patriots willing to make Europe great again is tougher than ever before. This is due to the fact that Hungary refused to play the role Brussels wanted him to, a coordinator of daily tasks at the institutions. Instead, Hungary engaged in serious actions, not only in European politics, but even beyond. Already the first steps of the presidency, I mean the peace-building mission of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, shocked Brussels, and they declared no support for us. My first question would be about this. This presidency started with this shock, Minister. How did you handle the situation from the very first moment on, taking into account this non-supportive political environment?
Well, I would start by clarifying the idea behind the Prime Minister's peace mission and its relationship to the presidency. We made it very clear from the beginning that, of course, the Prime Minister, in the first days of July, was not conducting the peace mission on behalf of the European Union or the institutions. This was a bilateral diplomacy initiative. And there were two important considerations behind it, just to better understand what has happened. Because it set the tone for the presidency as a whole, and it was a strategic choice at the very beginning, and it was not taken easily. So the first thing to decide whether you want an administrative or you want a political presidency. And of course, being a transitional presidency just after the EP elections, and in the middle of the US election campaign with domestic political difficulties in the two biggest member states of the European Union, it was clear that an administrative presidency as such would not suffice. In order to provide the necessary political guidance and political impetus for the next 5 years of the European Union, in order to break with the understanding that business as usual is an option, we had to make a political presidency. And the political notion behind the presidency was that Europe needs to change. And this change is needed if you read the Letter report and you read the Draghi report, and you need a number of preparatory documents and analysis. It is clear that Europe needs to change, and this change comes with political conflicts. This change comes with political disputes, and this change comes against vested interests. So there will be political conflict. The question is whether we have the desire and we have the strength to be the voice of this change and take on these political conflicts, and we decided from day number one that yes, we do on both counts. We have the will and we have the political ability to take on these conflicts, on these vested interests, in order to facilitate change in the European Union. And also when it comes to the issue of Russia's war against Ukraine, I mean, it's clear that there was no consensus among the member states and within European institutions what would be the strategy that pays off going forward. And here again, Hungary had this very peculiar position and this very peculiar understanding that there will be no solution on the battlefield. And in order to find a solution of the battlefield, you need to be able to to speak to all parties to the war and to all international stakeholders who have an influence on the outcome of this conflict. This was not consensual within the European Union. I believe it is still not consensual now, but now the mood is shifting even within the European Union and in some member states. But the Prime Minister wanted to make it clear from the very beginning that he has a political and moral responsibility to work for solutions off the battlefield, even it goes against the European mainstream and the majority opinion. Now, of course, this peace mission was received, how would I say, less than in a less than friendly way. It was, I think, it provoked reactions that I could qualify as hysterical. That was manifested in political symbolism and calling for the end of the Hungarian presidency and calling for boycotting certain events. which was a very difficult situation in the beginning. But I think the presidency recovered, as the twin summits in November showed, the European Political Community and the informal European Council meeting in Budapest on the 7th and 8th of November. There was no discussion of boycotting then. It was, of course, after the results of the US elections came in, which maybe was a factor to consider. And at the end of the day, the presidency managed to be what it wanted to be from the very beginning, a voice and a catalyst for change. And I think that it set into motion processes that are still ongoing today.
Thank you very much indeed. As you said, a voice and a catalyst for change is needed. And if we take the last year, competitiveness became a keyword for politics. About competitiveness and the economic situation of Europe and the European Union, clearly a voice and a catalyst for change is needed. Nevertheless, this was started much before the Hungarian presidency, because the Letta report and the Draghi report propelled it to the top of the agenda, and it was more than accurate that the Hungarian presidency put it also to the first place. Minister, could you please tell us what did the Hungarian presidency do to promote this idea of competitiveness? And what role can the Budapest Declaration on Competitiveness play to reinstate the European Union that is strong in the international system?
I want to be fair, and I have to start with the statement that the Hungarian presidency did not invent the idea of competitiveness. So before the start of the presidency, there is a trio program that is coordinated with the 3 member states. In our case, it was Spain, Belgium, and Hungary. And competitiveness figured prominently already in the trio program. So the implementation of the trio program's competitiveness part fall to a great extent to the Hungarian presidency, but that's not the brainchild of Hungary alone. And also there has been a discussion about competitiveness in the European Union for quite some time. And the Letta and the Draghi report is not without similar initiatives already on the table of the European institutions. What was striking for me personally is the complacency. So basically the Hungarian presidency's aim was to bring the European Union and the member states out of the state of complacency. Of course, we discussed that, well, we're losing competitiveness. This is not something that happened overnight. The year 2008 was mentioned already, and this is when the scissor between competitiveness of the US and the European Union started to open. And it is now progressing extremely fast. But this is something that we've been tackling more or less for 20 years. That there's this competitiveness gap opening on the 2 sides of the Atlantic. But it seems to be that things are unfortunately not as bad as they could be. Because if they were worse than they are now, probably there would be a bigger impetus to move towards the issue of competitiveness. But still I hear discussion that, well, yes, we're not as competitive, but we are still prosperous. Yes, we're losing competitiveness in some areas, but there are still areas where the European Union is leading when it comes to competitiveness. So things are not bad. I mean, things were always good to an extent and bad to an extent, but Europe has always managed. We are in the forefront for the past 500 years, and we will be there for the next 500 years as well. So things are not that bad. So this is the complacency. We believe that we are smart. We believe that we are attractive. We believe that we are Europeans, and simply because we are Europeans, we deserve a table where the big entities sit. And we believe that because we are Europeans, and because we are smart, and because we are attractive, what we think about ongoing developments in the 4 corners of the world, it matters. Just because we are smart and because we are Europeans. So we take this for granted. This is what I call complacency. But I mean, the European prosperity cannot be taken for granted. It will not be there forever. The fact that what we say and what we think about international development matters, it cannot be taken for granted. And as we can see, there are some corners of the world where what we think doesn't really matter anymore. I mean, I could say examples. In the Pacific, we have an opinion, we have a strategy, we have conclusion on the Pacific, but what the European Union thinks about developments in the Pacific, it doesn't really matter anymore. But I could come closer. I mean, we have declaration, the European Council adopts conclusion on the situation of the Middle East every time, but does it really matter what the European Council thinks about developments in the Middle East? The European Union is no longer a stakeholder when it comes to the Middle East. It seems to me that we have competition right to the east and also in the Western Balkans as well. So we cannot take this for granted. And we wanted to make this very strong point that we need to focus minds. And we need to focus minds on competitiveness. This is the main message of the Budapest Declaration on Competitiveness. If you read the declaration, I think it's a good idea to read it. It's not very long and it's not very complicated. I mean, it might even help you falling asleep if you have difficulties at the end of a long day. But the reason behind the declaration is that, first of all, it is by leaders. It is by the heads of state and government in the European Union. So this political message comes from the highest level. So it's not just the difference between the Letta and the Draghi report is that the Letta and Draghi report is an expert report. And it highlights the difficulties. But the Budapest Declaration is a political message by leaders, which says that, okay, we now see the challenges related to competitiveness. We want the European institutions to focus on this challenge. We want this to be a horizontal task undertaken in all policy areas by all EU institutions to focus on competitiveness. And we want to see specific results in certain key areas with specifically set deadlines. This is what the Budapest Declaration is about. The main message is not specific measures that are listed in the declaration, even though there are some measures, for example, on reducing energy prices, which is the biggest obstacles most of the enterprises identified when it comes to competitiveness, or to cut red tape reporting obligations by 25% by the end of the first semester. So there are specific measures in the declaration, but the main message is that this is a holistic challenge that needs a holistic reply, and we need to create a new environment, an enabling environment for the European economy to thrive. We took this seriously. I mean, it remains to be seen how seriously the institutions and member states take the Budapest Declaration, but at least the presidency, we took the Budapest Declaration very seriously, and we organized a number of discussions in all council formation, in all aspects of competitiveness. More than 50 discussions were held in different council formation in different aspects of the competitiveness to show that this is not an economic policy issue, but is an issue for the European Union as a whole. And we will see how the implementation will proceed. The Commission came out with the competitiveness compass. Personally, it is below my expectations, but at least it is something. And we will now see the specific papers promised in the competitiveness compass. For example, the new industrial deal, the energy package is coming out this week, and we will see how, and the omnibus package on cutting reporting obligations. The first package is also out most likely this week. So we will see how successful the Budapest Declaration was on focusing mind. Its success will be measured by action taken by the European institutions during this semester and the next.
Thank you very much, Minister. So if I may sum it up in a way that the Hungarian presidency, together with another two trio members, realized that at the same time when the world is speeding up, Europe is just sitting on the results and achievements of yesterday, and we still believe that only for being Europeans, as you said, we are attractive and we will have a place at the table no matter whether we take any steps towards improving ourselves. And well, yes, the competitiveness declaration, or the Budapest Declaration on Competitiveness, was really a kind of a step forward, not only policy-wise or in policy making, but also reinstating the hierarchy between the European Council, like together with the political leaders of Europe and the member states' political leaders, and kind of a hierarchical position of the Commission well below the European Council, saying that whatever is stated in the European declaration, or the Budapest Declaration on Competitiveness, there are priorities and tasks with which the European Council mandates the Commission. Is that correct?
Well, I would like to make 2 points on this. First, on being European. I do not suggest that we cease to be Europeans. So even if I see that in some areas the United States and even China is passing us by, becoming more competitive, I do not suggest that the solution would be is to become like the US or to become like China. I believe this is not the way forward. The task is a lot more complicated because I believe that we are Europeans and I propose to remain Europeans. And for example, for Europe, clearly how the Chinese model is looking at privacy and data protection and so on, this is clearly not an option for Europe or an option that Europeans would ever accept. Also, when it comes to the US economic model, I don't think that when it comes to the social net and social services, US solutions would be accepted by Europeans. This is, I mean, the federal statutory minimum for paid leave in the US is exactly 0 days. So I don't think that this is something that would ever work in Europe. So even though it seems easy and attractive to say, okay, let's just be like China or let's just be like the US, this doesn't work for Europe. So we will have to find European solutions and retain our competitiveness while remaining Europeans. So this is the challenge. But I never said it's intellectually or politically or economically easy. I just say that this is a challenge. The second point I want to make is about the institutional structure. I mean, I dealt with the European Union all my adult life, and sometimes I have the tendency to believe that everybody shares my passion for the institutional niceties. What is the relationship between the European Council, the Council and the Commission, and some advisory bodies, and what working group in the Council is dealing with this, and it's a huge change. Now we have a horizontal working group. Previously we had several working groups. So this is something that keeps me awake at night, but I believe that maybe it's not as fascinating for everybody. But I have to say that it is extremely important, and here I will be a bit political. It is extremely important to make sure who sets the political direction for the European Union as a whole, and who bears the political responsibility for that. And here I think the informal European Council in Budapest was a wake-up call, because leaders realized that when we discuss competitiveness, this is a very abstract term, but competitiveness is about jobs, it's about salaries, it's about GDP, it's about the sustainability of social system, it's about the sustainability of the pension system, it's about those indicators that point towards political success. So basically leaders realized if the European Union and the European institutions fail on competitiveness, it is their job that is on the line. Because, I mean, you go into election campaigns every 4 or 5 years, and you will have to explain people how come that there is no longer the job security that you're used to. Why is the reason that industries are relocating from your region? And then, if you don't have a serious answer to that or a solution to the challenges, you will be out of your jobs. I mean, if you look at the results of elections in Europe, it is extremely difficult for a government in Europe now to stay in office. And this is mainly because of economic reasons. Voters don't see that governments fulfill their promises to the prosperity and security of their citizens. And of course you can say that, well, they are European regulation that I cannot control. You can say that, okay, well, this company relocated because of the GDPR and because of the AI regulation to the United States, but I have no control over the GDPR or the AI. You can say that, okay, there is no new investment in Europe when it comes to refineries or heavy industries because of the green transition, but I don't have any control over the green transition because this is taken on a European level. But they will lose their jobs nevertheless. This Budapest Declaration was a call for the European institutions, including the Commission, that we want you to focus on competitiveness, because competitiveness will deliver jobs, competitiveness will deliver competitive salaries, competitiveness will deliver economic growth that allows me as a member state to finance certain social security and certain public projects that can guarantee that I will stay in power because I fulfill the expectation of the people. So this kind of political transmission was not so clear, but I think the Budapest Declaration made it clear that I realize that it is my job on the line as leaders of member states, and I expect the European institutions to help me deliver to the citizens. This is key.
I believe we all catch the idea. And even though I share your passion about the EU and the EU law, I believe it was clear for everyone that some fresh air was really necessary in these terms, remaining European, but kind of speeding up our competitiveness once again. And therefore, as you said, the Letter report and the Draghi report are kind of expert reports in the nature, so they are descriptive. And on the other hand, the Budapest Declaration on competitiveness is much more an action plan or a roadmap to be followed. Nevertheless, you touched upon the competitiveness compass of the European Commission, and it was just a bit more than a week ago when the Commission came out with their annual working program as well. Do you see, Minister, that the priorities and the tasks, so to say, of the European Council mandated the Commission with in the Budapest Declaration are well reflected in those documents? You said already they are below your expectations, but the way I see it, the question is whether there is an opportunity, politically or legally speaking, for the European Council and the politicians and the leaders of the member states to kind of enforce the decisions or the mandates made in the Budapest Declaration on competitiveness on the administrative body, I mean the Commission, of course.
Well, it's I can look at it as a legal issue, and legally speaking, of course, the treaties are clear that the European Council sets the political direction of the European Union. It is also clear that the conclusions of the European Council are not legal texts, which means they are not legally binding on any of the institutions, even though they can formulate a strong political guidance. It is also clear that it is the Commission who has the right of initiative when it comes to legislative activities in the European Union, and the Commission cannot be forced to come up with a proposal, even though the Commission voluntarily put itself in a position towards the European Parliament, where the European Parliament is almost in a position to force the Commission to submit a legislative proposal, unlike the Council. There's so much about institutional balance within the treaties. But still, legally speaking, neither the European Council nor the Council nor the Member States have the legal power to force the Commission to propose any legislative activities. And I go further. Once the Commission is confirmed, Member States and the Council is no longer in the position to remove the Commission. Only the European Parliament is in a position to remove the Commission. So legally speaking, the tools at the disposal of the European Council, the Council and the Member States are quite weak when it comes to forcing the Commission to move one way or another, which leaves the European Council, the Council and the Member States with political tools to put pressure on the Commission to deliver, especially when it comes to the conclusion of the European Council. The European Council said in the Budapest Declaration that it will regularly revisit the implementation of the Budapest Declaration, and I believe that the March European Council on the 20th will be a good opportunity to see what the Commission has proposed when it comes to competitiveness and whether it meets the European Council's expectations.
Thank you very much. It was not only the competitiveness that was on the agenda, but also the enlargement of the EU and of the Schengen area were key priorities of the Hungarian EU presidency. In fact, it was already a priority during the 2011 presidency. What role did the Hungary play in enlargement in 2011 and last year? How do you evaluate the success of the presidency in this respect, and why is the enlargement important for Europe and the European Union?
During the previous Hungarian presidency was the last time we successfully concluded accession negotiations. That was with Croatia, and that was in 2011. And it was in 2011 when the technical evaluation of Schengen compliance in the case of Romania and Bulgaria started. And I believe that there is a symbolism to the fact that Romania, the decision about Romania and Bulgaria becoming a full member of the Schengen area was taken during the Hungarian presidency. Of course, it was it was a unanimous decision, so it required the political consent of all member states, which was not an easy political achievement. And also during the Hungarian presidency, the accession process of the Western Balkans was restarted in a sense. For 2.5 years, there were no chapters opened or closed. And during the Hungarian presidency, we managed to organize 3 IGCs. And the last time we had 3 IGCs in the accession process was in 2017. So clearly there was a big step forward when it comes to the Schengen accession, and there was a relaunch of the accession process in the Western Balkans. These were very specific policy objectives of the Hungarian presidency. I think the Hungarian presidency was in a unique position to forge this consensus because of the understanding and because of the ongoing cooperation between Hungary and Austria, and also Romania and Bulgaria when it comes to fighting illegal migration. And I think the political trust and the common experience in protecting external borders and fighting illegal immigration, not only when it comes to the Hungarian-Serbian borders, but also further to the south in northern Macedonia, and also the cooperation between Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Austria created the political trust that at the end of the day made it possible for Austria to agree to this based on a very specific cooperation scheme to be continued after accession when it comes to stopping illegal migration. I think it's also a personal achievement to Minister Pintér, who was already active during the previous Hungarian presidency when it comes to the Schengen accession process, and I think he deserves all the recognition for this very delicate and very difficult political task that he completed successfully.
Thank you very much. As you mentioned the issue of illegal migration, let me jump to this topic briefly. There is a rift between member states, one could even say the ordinary citizens' viewpoint and the attitude of Brussels, and it's getting larger and larger. On the one hand, we see a political agenda from Brussels aiming to manage migration, while what we see on the other hand is day after day, new and new attacks are committed in Western Europe, mostly by immigrants against innocent citizens, Germans, Frenchmen, Austrians, just to mention a few from the recent past. How do you see, Minister, why does Brussels continue to force their so-called immigration policy on the EU and the member states, and how long can they do that?
This on migration and the migration and asylum framework that the European Union has, our take is quite simple, and I think it becomes more and more simple every day. As long as you don't manage to protect the external borders of the European Union, and as long as you don't find a solution to make sure that only those enter the territory of the European Union who have a legal base to do so, even if it requires innovative solutions, then you will never have a working migration and asylum system. And if you don't have this, all adverse consequences will follow. We see now the reintroduction of the Schengen internal border controls. In some borders this goes on for years now, and I believe that this will continue to be the case because there is simply no political momentum for lifting these controls once they are reinstated. And I believe that there is a very strange understanding of solidarity within the European Union, where the distribution of illegal migrants is considered to be a source of solidarity, whereas the protection of the external borders is not considered as a source of solidarity. I also see there is now a clear double standards emerging in some borders of the European Union, it is okay to have physical infrastructure, including fence and even more, and it's okay to completely shut the external borders, where you simply refuse admission to any asylum seekers, whereas in other external borders of the European Union, this is not the case. And I believe that at some point we need a clear reset of the migration system. And I also believe that this would require a complete overhaul of the system of international agreements that we have in place. Now we will have a very important hearing at the Court of Justice of the European Union. I think this will be tomorrow on the 25th of February, where the Court of Justice will look at the preliminary ruling request of an Italian court on the legality of the agreement between Italy and Albania. And I think this will be crucial, because if the European Court of Justice strikes down this agreement, of course, legally speaking, it cannot do so. It can only say that these are the points that the Italian court will need to take into account when applying the Italian legislation related to the Italian-Albanian agreement. But politically speaking, the Court of Justice of the European Union is in a power to strike down this agreement between Italy and Albania, which would be the end of alternative solutions as we know it. And this will create, and I think this outcome is more likely than not. And if this will be the case, then politically speaking, we are at an impossible situation where there is a member state and there's a clear majority of member states who would entertain the idea of alternative solutions, but there is a court saying that, well, the EU law and the international obligations does not allow to do so. And this means that the political opportunities for finding a sustainable solution for the migration crisis that we have will be much more limited than we see now. So at some point, this international legal framework needs to be revisited as well, because if it is interpreted as an obstacle of finding innovative solution, then the situation will not be politically sustainable.
Absolutely, and that means that we are in a deadlock situation, and obviously the migration crisis is with us, and we need to do something with it, and we need to do it as soon as possible. Let me jump to the last question, if I may, about the Russian-Ukrainian war. Today is the day, it just started 3 years ago exactly, and Hungary says since the very beginning that to achieve peace in the Russian-Ukrainian war shall be the most important, not only for the parties to the conflict, but also for Europe. You briefly touched this topic upon, Minister, but my question would be to detail it a little bit more, and especially that taken into account the recent international political changes. How do you see, or how do you evaluate the criticism from the European Union institutes or the European partners or even some member states? Do you see that the climate is changing in this context? And as a matter of fact, can you kind of answer the question, how can the idea of peace be opposed by anyone? Or what was the basic of this criticism for 3 years?
Okay, this is a very complicated question, and I'm afraid I don't have the answers to all elements to it. I would like to chart for you a coherent picture of how I see the situation, and maybe this answers some of the questions you raised. But this is very sensitive and very controversial, and to an extent, what I will say could be disturbing. But I am a politician, and I have a responsibility to state even the difficult cases, because at some point politicians need to make difficult decisions, and this is what distinguishes amateur politicians from statesmen. So first of all, we start from a moral and we start from an international legal perspective, and I think both of these perspectives are quite straightforward. There is a country that attacked another sovereign nation. This is morally wrong, and this is against international law. So this is the starting point. But this is the point of departure. So the question is not whether we believe this is morally wrong, because we believe it is morally wrong. And the question is not whether this is against international law, because it is against international law. The question is, what do we do with a situation like this? And this is where the job of politicians begins. This is not where the job of politicians ends. And the next step is, what can we do to make sure that another moral obligation, which is the protection of human life, and another political obligation is to create a safe and secure environment for Hungary requires. And we came to the conclusions from the very beginning that this conflict will not have a solution on the battlefield, like I said in the beginning. If this conflict does not have a solution on the battlefield, and even morally speaking, I mean, a war never decides who is right and who is wrong. The only thing a war decides who lives and who dies. So we cannot pass moral judgments on an outcome of the war. So the question is, if we all agree that this war will not have a solution on the battlefield, then how do we come to a solution off the battlefield? And now it seems that there are direct negotiations going on between the United States and Russia. Now everybody says that these discussions are about Ukraine. It is interpreted in the European media, and if I look at the statements of certain European leaders, it seems that these discussions are about Ukraine, and the European Union, or Europe, I'm not sure whether it's the European Union, but Europe should have a seat at the table. But I think they are fundamentally wrong. These discussions between the US and Russia, they are not about Ukraine. These discussions about the future of US-Russia relationship. They are not discussing Ukraine, they are discussing the relationship between the United States and Russia. And one part of this broad relationship is the future of European security architecture. This is a chapter of these discussions. And one of the sub-chapters of these discussions is the future of Ukraine. So this is not about Ukraine, this is about the broad arrangement for the future between the US and Russia. And of course, when it comes to the arrangement between US and Russia, Europe should have a place. Of course, not all elements of US-Russia relations involve Europe, but some elements of this relationship involve Europe. And of course, it would be, and I'm looking for the correct terminology, it would be nice if Europeans would be at the table when Russians and Americans discuss European security architecture. Now, okay, let's say it is nice. But then who should sit at the table when Russia and the US discusses the future of European security architecture? I mean, this is a serious question. I mean, we say that Europe should be sitting at the table. When European institution leaders say Europe should sit at the table, they usually mean representatives of the European institutions. But my understanding is that the United States would never accept the representatives of the European institutions to sit at the table to discuss the future of European security architecture. First, because they don't think they are the adequate interlocutors. Second, leaders of these institutions don't have a mandate to negotiate the future European architecture on behalf of member states, because member states never gave them this mandate. The European Union clearly does not have the competence to do so. But leaving aside the issue of competence, because the European Union was very flexible in interpreting competences lately, but let's say that pretending that the EU would have competence to negotiate this, member states never gave him the mandate to negotiate on their behalf. So the first question is, who would be discussing? I don't have an answer to this question, but I just signal that probably the US would never expect European institutions as interlocutors, and the European institutions leaders clearly don't have the mandate to negotiate this. Number two, what are we discussing? Again, the question is, are we discussing the future of Ukraine? Of course we're not discussing the future of Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is a sovereign country. The future of Ukraine is for Ukrainians and Ukraine to decide. We cannot discuss the future of Ukraine. But we can and we should discuss the future European security architecture. And yes, we should discuss security guarantees, but not security guarantees for Ukraine. We cannot discuss security guarantees for Ukraine. Only Ukrainians can discuss security guarantees for themselves. We should discuss security guarantees for us. And if we come to these points, then we might have a serious discussion about who and what should discuss with whom about what. but we are not even getting there. So I don't know whether I answered the questions. Probably I answered none of the questions, and I raised quite a few others. But I think these are the questions. I mean, of course, Russia and the US are discussing. They are not discussing Ukraine primarily. They are discussing their own relationship. Some of this relationship concerns Europe. Should we be involved? Well, it would be nice, but then we should decide whom to involve and what to discuss. And I believe we should discuss security guarantees for us, Europe. And if we get to this point, then we have a fighting chance to finding a European consensus on how to move forward. We are very far from that as we speak.
Thank you very much, Minister. These are challenging times, and obviously we cannot relax because the future is very challenging ahead of us. I would love to have this discussion the whole day, but we are slowly but surely running out of time. And even if we have touched upon a series of issues, I'm pretty sure that there are still a lot to say. If I may, I would ask you to briefly summarize the ultimate aim or aims of the Hungarian government in European politics right now, just very briefly, if I may.
Make Europe great again.
I was kind of sure about this answer. Thank you very much. This is a straightforward summary, and it's easy to keep in mind and not to forget. Thank you very much indeed. And now we might have some time for a couple of questions. If you have anything, I turn to the audience. Please, the gentleman over there.
Yes, my name is Pertti Anttinen. I'm the ambassador of Finland here, and thank you, Minister Bóka, for your, let's say, realistic comments on many issues and also highlighting the achievements of the Hungarian presidency. It's always a pleasure listening to you. We should do it more often, actually. So, but yes, as to the Finland, we could agree most of the Hungary's EU presidency items, including this, the competitiveness, is very crucial to continue discussion and action around that issue. But I have one question now, and this comes to the Ukraine and Russia's aggression on Ukraine, which is 3 years now, sadly. I think one of the countries which was not for peace was Russia. I mean, must be made very clear. So I don't agree that others were pro-war. It was Russia carrying out the aggression and still is going on with the aggression, and they were against the peace in Ukraine. But my question is to you, Minister, how do you see Ukraine's European future? Is there any? Thank you.
Any more questions? Maybe we can collect some, or it depends on...
Let's see.
Are there any more questions? Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your excellent presentation. It was a real pleasure to listen to you, even though it's Monday morning. So when we get to the EU and competitiveness, I would say that one of the challenges for the European Union is to make faster decisions in important questions. And you know that there is a discussion about the QMV at certain areas that European Union can get to faster decisions. Do you see any areas where, let's say, Hungary would be open to discuss this kind of a question? Thank you.
And maybe a last one, if there is any. No more questions? Then, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. On Ukraine's European future, well, Ukraine is a candidate country to the European Union, and the accession process of Ukraine is ongoing. Here, I would like to make 2 points. One, I don't see, and there is discussion now when it comes to security guarantees for Ukraine, and the EU membership and the acceleration of the accession process is sometimes mentioned as part of the security guarantee package. I believe this is a wrong approach. I don't think that EU membership is a security guarantee, and I don't think that the acceleration of the accession process is the right way. I believe that accession process should remain merit-based, and I believe that the accession process should be about fulfilling the criteria for acceding to the European Union. I also believe, and my Prime Minister made comments on this aspect of Ukraine accession in his speech yesterday, that looking at the challenges Ukraine faces, and looking at the size and the characteristics of Ukraine's economy, its eventual and potential accession to the European Union would have far-ranging consequences for the EU that we do not see entirely as we speak. And now we are discussing the next 7 years financial framework of the European Union, and the question is how to plan this MFF. Whether we see Ukraine within the European Union before the end of the next financial framework, or we don't. And I believe that the prudent planning is to plan with an MFF for the next financial cycle without Ukraine being in the European Union. This is the only way where we can have a realistic discussion about the next multi-annual financial framework. On the QMV, I have a short answer and I have a long one. I will deliver something in between. If I look at those areas that are still unanimity-based areas, first of all, there is not even close. I mean, in order to change the voting rules, you need unanimity. So by unanimity, you can change some of the areas from unanimity to QMV, even without treaty amendments, with the passerelle clauses. But if I look at these areas, I don't see any areas where we would have even close to unanimity to moving from unanimity to QMV. And the member states who are opposed are not always the same. Well, if you look at taxation, you have quite a few member states who are against moving from unanimity to QMV. If you look at enlargement, there are quite a few member states who are opposed to moving from unanimity to QMV, and these are not the same member states when it comes to taxation. Or if you look at CFSP, then again, you have quite a few member states who are against moving from unanimity to QMV, but these are not the same member states as with enlargement or with the taxation. So I think that there is no political consensus in moving from unanimity to QMV. So politically speaking, this is a theoretical issue because we are not even close to unanimity to moving from unanimity to QMV. Second, except for CFSP, where individual member states could block declarations in substantive legislative areas, for example, when it comes to taxation. I don't see any area where this would be an obstacle to making speedy decisions. And most of the decisions we need for competitiveness, these decisions are QMV decisions, except in the area of taxation. But I have a fundamental issue with using taxation of the European Union level as a tool to competitiveness, because whatever the European Union did on the level of taxation so far was against competitiveness and not for competitiveness. And competitiveness was not even a factor when considering decisions on taxation. So I don't think that moving from unanimity to QMV would be in favor of Europe's competitiveness. I know that the Draghi report says otherwise. It says that these decisions are pronged and so on and so forth, but I do not recall any issue where this has been an obstacle in enhancing the EU's competitiveness. And finally, and this is politically speaking the most important point, I believe that the best way to find political consensus on key areas where you need political ownership and you need political determination is actually to find political consensus and not to do away with the requirement of political consensus. Because at the end of the day, you can push through a decision by QMV, but then you need implementation, you need political ownership, you need political commitment, and then you don't have that. Look at the Migration Pact. The European Council decided in 2015 that all decisions on the new Migration and Asylum Pact will be taken by unanimity, even though the treaties only require qualified majority. This was the decision of the European Council. Member states did not respect this decision of the European Council and pushed through the Migration Pact with qualified majority. And where we are with the Migration Pact? Are we better off with the Migration Pact that we adopted with qualified majority and will not be implemented? Or we would rather have something that is based on unanimity and has real political ownership? And I would go for that one.
Thank you very much, Minister, indeed. I think we really learned a lot and got a much deeper understanding on the current state of affairs of the European issues. And the lesson is learned. We need to have political debates and expert-level discussions to make Europe great again. Congratulations once again for the achievement of the Hungarian presidency, and have a nice day. Thank you for the audience as well.
Next up, we have a panel discussion titled Resetting the Imbalances of the European Union. For this discussion, we have with us Rodrigo Ballester, Head of the Center for European Studies at MCC, Gergely Dobozi, Head of Operations at the Danube Institute, and Bernadette Petri, Head of the Europe Strategy Research Institute at the Ludovica University of Public Service. The discussion will be moderated by Tamás Poronyi, Director for Strategy at the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs. Please take your seats.
I'm sitting here. That's so much. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for coming to our event. So great numbers, and I think it has been a good decision so far because we had this wonderful discussion with Minister Bóka, and I'm really happy about that because now I have munitions for my classes for the afternoon. So for me it was definitely enriching, and now I really, without further ado, I would start this second conversation, the expert level panel of pretty much the same issues. Of course, the objective here is to pick up the themes that were favored by the Hungarian presidency and try to keep them further, because I think what the goal was during the presidency, not to have some of the topics highlighted, but also to stress them, to facilitate some change within the European Union, and to reset some of the imbalances of the European Union, which is pretty much the title of our conversation. So I think first we should address what are the imbalances of the European Union. What do you think? What are the main dividing lines in the European Union? Because for quite some years they've been talking about East and West, but there were some years when they were talking about North and South, when it was about fiscal policy. You can also call it new and old member states, but you can also call it, the dichotomy between the richer and the poorer. So what do you think? What are the main dividing lines within the European Union? And for the first question, I would suggest around like this.
Well, sure. Thank you very much for this question, which is quite horizontal, I have to tell. And so basically, before covering these balances, in my opinion, taking place in the EU, I would just highlight the role and the importance of a presidency, of an EU presidency, because it has a great opportunity to address these balances. And I think that this was the case for the Hungarian presidency, so that was the aim, to somehow address these differences, these balances. And when talking about what kind of disbalances take place actually in the EU, we can just mention everything that Tamás just ordered, because so there are obviously still there the East-West divide. This is normal thing. South-West is also there. So everything is still there that there has been. But most importantly, I would say that the disbalances between the EU and the member states, and consequently also between the EU and the citizens. So this is the very problem we try to address during the EU presidency, because the most important core value in the focus of our presidency has been the importance of people's well-being, the importance of stability, the importance of economic prosperity, and all these elements guided the presidency to come up with the priorities they came up with. And all these priorities were trying to address exactly the disbalance. That sometimes we are experiencing that the European Union can be ignorant, reluctant, sometimes even potentially disrespectful towards the interest of the member states. It's not happening everywhere, but it is happening in some cases. And most of the cases, the presidency tried to cover by their priorities were exactly bringing back the balance. So bringing back the aims and the values the European Union is set for. So that was the core element. And then about all the details, I think that we are going to dig into the details a bit more. But this is mainly like an initial idea about the disbalance and how it is linked to the presidency.
Thank you very much. Rodrigo, what is your take on this?
Thank you very much for the invitation. To be more concrete, I would say, first of all, the Green Deal. I think the big elephant in the room that is now on the EU table, one of them is the Green Deal. When we speak about competitiveness, we speak about red tape. If we speak about red tape, we speak about bureaucracy. And today, the main source of bureaucracy that is now on the shoulders of the enterprises, so it seems like the EU and especially the Commission managed to outsource what they do best, which is bureaucracy, into the private sector. And the main source of that is the Green Deal. What do we do with it? Minister Bóka said that the compass of the European Commission is under its expectations. For me, it's far below, even the minimum that we can require from it. When you look at it, and they say, oh, we're going to reduce by 25 and even 35% the bureaucracy in member states. Why not 75? Why not 85? So this is even like a confession that, we are even happy and proud to burden and to drown our enterprises with bureaucracy. Yesterday, I just had a look, just to give you a concrete example, I had a look at the sustainability reporting standards, which is a Commission regulation, so that was adopted on the 31st of July 2023, so quite recent. You know how many, and so basically this is like one of the Bibles, not the only one, but one of the Bibles that EU businesses, at least the big ones, have to follow. You know how many pages? 284. So it's almost like a PhD. It is a PhD, actually. So, and most of them are, again, the source is the Green Deal. So, is it okay to reduce the Green Deal by 25, or do we have to be more disruptive and more radical? I think this is the first elephant in the room. Second, migration, the European Migration Pact. I think the real question is whether it will be implemented or not, because the winds of riot against this text that is basically obsolete before it is even implemented will be the next political battle. And of course, there is one issue that is very, very thorny. The commissioner, the minister touched upon it, but I wouldn't call it so, like divisive, because it's true that there is a vast majority of member states that see it in one way, and very few that see it in the other. Is, of course, the possible peace talk regarding the war in Ukraine. But if you want me to quote one single divide, is no longer northeast, northwest, or whatever. It's not a geographical one, it's an ideological one. It is the divide of the cordon sanitaire. And I think this is even more salient since November and since January, since Trump came back, because what I see the divide is what the American people have, democratically voted with a huge landslide mandate is exactly what the cordon sanitaire and how this very, very strict, arrogantly strict cordon sanitaire is applied in a very bureaucratic way, by the way, in the European Union. So this is where we really have the big divide today.
What would you add, Gergely?
So thank you for inviting me here. So good morning. First of all, I'm sorry for my longer than usual reaction time. I've been assembling HIIA furnitures during the night, and it's not even a nightmare. What's a nightmare, on the other hand, is as a citizen of a 1,000-year-old country, is to see how the progression towards the federal union is made during step by step. And I think this is one of the biggest challenge for the European Union nowadays, and I think it has much to do with the ever-intensifying war around the rule of law. And it has really much to do with the concept of lawfare, because ever since this concept, the rule of law, has become part of the political mainstream, it created battleground for political entities to form alliances and turn this whole debate into a war in which where we can find friends and enemies. And this is a real absurd situation, because we now, I think, found ourselves in some kind of Euro trilemma, where the EU cannot simultaneously enforce standardized rule of law requirements, promote sovereign state interests, and economic prosperity at the same time. And I'm happy to elaborate on this, but this is my really short introduction.
Thank you very much. I think the first question was largely about what ails the European Union, what's wrong with it, and we actually bumped into lots and lots of answers. So my proposal for the format is this. I will pose you separately 3 questions in this order about, let's say, cohesion policy, then competitiveness, and then what about the rule of law, and we will see how much time will be left when we finish, if you don't disagree. Okay, so what about cohesion policy, which was, this is an arcanum, I would say. I mean, no one really knows how cohesion policies work, because it is so sophisticated and so hard to crack. If there is anyone in this room, it's Bernadette who knows that. Could we achieve anything on this point? Now the MFF is under consideration. It's a highly political issue, but also it's a fairly complicated policy issue. How do we stand on this?
Yeah, and thank you for the question, because I think that I'm easy, since I can react on the 2 other topics as well when talking about cohesion. So cohesion used to sound like a very technical expression, and one might think or consider this being really just like a principle, and then there is cohesion money flowing within the EU. However, the principle of cohesion is more important than that, because it is somewhere, we find it somewhere among the core values of the European Union, since it goes against regional disparities. And we have just mentioned whether or not there are still existing differences, disparities, divides within the EU. I partly agree with the others. I still believe that all the existing or so far existed divides are still there. But most importantly, the regional differences are definitely present within the EU. And when talking about the importance of cohesion policy, so the priority of the Hungarian presidency has been to keep the regional principle, so the importance of working against regional disparities, instead of giving up this whole principle and just following the principle of social cohesion, which is something very different. And this is maybe where these ideological differences come in, because when talking about social cohesion, it is completely different from the territorial one that we would like to protect. Why? Because regional policy itself is trying to detect where the EU needs to intervene by money or by different policies to catch up those regions and create a single market, seeing what kind of geographical, geopolitical differences there are. Meanwhile, at the same time, there is apparently a willingness of the European Union changing this principle and going instead towards the cohesion policy's social dimension and addressing those differences that are mainly there because of political or ideological reasons. So this is a value set, this is a value choice of member states, what kind of societal differences you take into consideration. It is important that the EU can set obviously values. These are good things. However, it cannot be done instead of taking over the importance of territorial cohesion itself. So therefore, we were arguing during the presidency that this principle should be kept. And this is why also in the Budapest Declaration it pops up, saying that it should be protected in the future. Now we are at the beginning of conversation about the new MFF. So the political negotiation will start in the summer. Very timely to see what is the landscape within the EU and what can we expect for the MFF negotiations about cohesion policy. We can find and we can see that, first of all, seeing the communication on the MFF, there seemed to be a centralization from the behalf of the European Union, and then secondly, there seems to be also a kind of a direction where the social dimension of cohesion comes in, maybe also partly replacing the territorial cohesion policy, so the regional policy itself. And this is why Hungary is trying to protect the same cohesion policy there has been before, because we truly believe that addressing regional disparities is crucial. And it is also crucial from, as I have said, from the perspective of a single market. Because just seeing, for instance, innovation, and this brings me to this topic, and then I will end up here somewhere. This brings me to my topic on the directly managed EU programs, where, for instance, we can see that there are extreme regional disparities when drawing the money, when absorbing the money from the programs. And obviously in the sphere of the directly managed EU programs, you can see that there is no national threshold, so all the applying actors has to show a kind of a European level competitiveness. They are fighting against each other to get the money. However, since this is the tool, this is the financial tool to help innovation from the perspective of the single market, in the MFF position, we are also including the importance that regional disparities and the regional differences regarding absorbing the money from these funds should be addressed in the new MFF, because this is another dimension besides the normal cohesion policy money to somehow create a more unique, more smooth and more unified single market, which is also a priority for Hungary for the future.
Thank you very much. And now I would turn to Rodrigo about competitiveness. So the Hungarian EU presidency's buzzword was competitiveness, but it's much easier said than done because of the red tape that you were just mentioning. So what do you think? How can one insist on competitiveness? How can one push European decision makers into the direction to take real steps to achieve it?
That is the question. Ez a kérdés.
That's why I asked it.
Yes, because it's true that it's, this Budapest Declaration is very disruptive. But it's disruptive because what is very astonishing to me is that that's been quite a while that the EU didn't speak properly about competitiveness. But it's not the first time that the EU spoke about it. The Lisbon strategy. I was still studying. I was still in university when Barroso came with this Lisbon strategy. Did it work? Partially only. And so my question, is there a mood for competitiveness beyond declarations? And if I have to point at the only problem I see in the Budapest Declaration on the competitiveness is that it gives too much trust on the European Commission. It says, we have a problem, hence we will ask the European Commission to come up with concrete solutions. We have a problem here, so we will ask the Commission to do this and that. I don't always say that the Commission is the main problem of the European Union. In general, I think it is the European Parliament, and by far. But in this case, as a toolbox, as the person who is supposed to put ideas on the table, especially on something called curbing bureaucracy and red tape, which is, again, is almost against its DNA. I mean, the Commission is now probably like the biggest producer, now that USAID has been dismantled, is one of the biggest producers of bureaucracy of the Western world. And, you know, allow me to be a bit cynical, but the first time that the European Commission put in place a group to simplify bureaucracy, it was in 2007. It was actually chaired by the former CDU candidate, Edmund Stoiber. And they were renewed and they produced a very nice report in 2014, 10 years ago. And what happened ever since? Not nothing. What happened is that bureaucracy has been multiplied exponentially, especially in the light of the Green Deal. And so now we're asking the Commission basically to, this Commission that for 5 years was basically like implementing this very, very bureaucratic policy, to basically, you know, reduce it by 20, 35, 40%. I think there is a lack of credibility there. And so again, I am worried that we're asking, you know, to the wrong person to do the right thing. Again, think about like the recently European competitiveness compass. I don't think it is very ambitious. So it's true that it departs from the mandate of the Budapest Declaration. The Budapest Declaration says in paragraph 4, please reduce it by 25%. And they even say, oh, we're going to reduce it by 35% for SMEs. Okay, fine, but allow me not to clap because, again, it's too little, far too little and far too late. And also, bear in mind that those are proposals that the Commission is going to put on the table one day, that will also be voted one day in the Council of Ministers and also in the European Parliament. We have a European Parliament that is not very keen, very ideological, very fanatic, very off the ground, that is absolutely not willing to even find a bit of pragmatism and compromises on those issues. And so what might be the result? That this compass will be translated maybe in 2 or 3 years into very diluted legislation, so legislation that are going to solve what? I mean, what is going to happen in the US in 3 years? In 3 years, they would have basically sent, I don't know how many rockets maybe, to Mars. And in the meantime, we will still be discussing if it's a second early first reading or second early reading or whatever. So I'm very, very skeptical about this compass. And again, I think if you want to have quick results, the answer is subsidiarity. And so maybe for a little while, we need to give more leeway to the member states so that they can react quicker in a more agile manner, because if you are waiting for centralized solutions, it's not going to happen, and certainly not quick enough and good enough. I also give you another example. That's, I think also the EU suffers from an absolute saturation, an absolute lack of ideology. I give you a concrete example. One of the proposals of the Budapest Declaration is to create a fifth, it was from the Draghi report and it's been taken in the Budapest Declaration. Let's create a fifth freedom for researchers. Fine, good idea. Thank you, Mr. Draghi. But how can we do that if at the same time you have 21 Hungarian universities who would be automatically excluded from this regime on rule of law concerns on totally hypothetical grounds? So, do we get pragmatic or do we keep being ideological? Do we want really to have a fifth fundamental freedom, or is it only for all the member states except one, or for thousands of universities except 21? So this is where I see a total lack of credibility. On the one hand, we see the Commission producing very nice fact sheets on the European compass, and on the other hand, they produce a 14 pages decision to justify that they will not lift any sanctions to Hungarian universities because there is a lack of a millimetric implementation of this or that. So while some countries have a regime d'exception, which in the name of the rule of law is very difficult to swallow, you know, then we are dreaming about a fifth fundamental freedom. Well, I have more pragmatic solutions for that. Get rid of this ridiculous and arbitrariness in the conditionality, and again, let's start top down, give more leeway to the member states, and let's not wait always for the Commission to put the good ideas on the table, because despite their goodwill, I mean, time proved them wrong. In order to cut bureaucracy and to cut red tape, I'm sorry, they are absolutely not the right toolbox. They are not the right person, it's not the right casting.
Sorry, Rodrigo, I won't let you leave. I have a follow-up question for you, because I think the diagnosis of slow decision making is, of course, absolutely true. However, from a different logic, you can also conclude that more QMV and more federalization would solve the problem. Why not? And because the think, decide, act cycle of the American government seems to be 3 weeks, and for the European Union is like 3 years. So it's still pretty much a problem. So why not then federalization?
For many reasons. To start with, Tamás, I will tell you that the more I think about QMV and unanimity, the more I like unanimity, to the point where I'm really falling in love now with unanimity. I really think that the more we extend unanimity, the more we will preserve the European Union. Because I think a European Union where every country can basically respect its very, very red lines, and this is especially true in the foreign policy. Because, for example, if we speak about South America, the red lines of Spain are not the red lines of Hungary. If you speak about the Western Balkans, the red lines of Hungary are not the red lines of Spain. So I think it's very smart to have a system whereby, no prime minister has to come back home and say, you know what, they outweighed us on something that is strategic for us, but not for them. So to start with, I think it will work better with more unanimity. So sorry for being iconoclastic, but I would like to have more unanimity, not less. When it comes to competitiveness, and Minister Bóka said it, it's most of the implementation of the Budapest Declaration could be done by qualified majority. So the question is almost irrelevant. But what is still lacking is a political consensus, even by qualified majority. Why was not the Lisbon agenda properly implemented? Because we still have very different points of view and interests at the level of the European Union. So there again, more flexibility, so that member states have more leeway and do not always to agree on everything, not even through directives, but like to give them more general objectives that are normally the ones that you find in the Council conclusions. Council conclusions, I am a lawyer, and still I think they are more effective for the European Union than the regulation or even the directive. And again, I very much believe that now if you want to act very, very, very quickly, the answer is not more QMV that, by the way, will take ages, if not a decade, to get it, because it's decided by unanimity, is to give right here, right now, much more flexibility. I'm sure that member states have very good ideas about what they could do to improve their competitiveness. Can we let them do, at least for 2 or 3 years now that we have a tornado on the other side of the Atlantic, where basically they are governing at the speed of light? I don't think that qualified majority or co-decision, ordinary procedure, second readings, first readings are really the answer. So can we have a look at something called subsidiarity? It seems that everyone speaks about it and no one really cares. So subsidiarity and principle of conferral of competences. So one advice, if there is one article you need to read in the treaty, is Article 5. It's the most beautiful and well-drafted article in the whole treaty, and probably the most ignored by all the decision makers. Article 5, conferral of competences and subsidiarity.
Thank you very much. And then, Gergely, I'm turning to you. So there was another elephant in the room which was not green. I don't know the color, but it's the rule of law. And when we talk about the imbalances of the European Union, some, especially here in Eastern Europe, have the impression that rule of law is something very strict when it comes to like small member states, and when it comes to vested interests in the capital of the European Union, it's much more flexible or even not existing, and this can be an imbalance if you think about it. So what is your take on this particular point?
First, I completely agree with Rodrigo, pretty much with everything, but especially on unanimity. If you have unanimity, you have veto, and veto for me is like a lightsaber, like a civilized weapon of a civilized era. And what we now see with the QMV breaching in is not a civilized approach. Now, returning back to your question regarding the rule of law, rule of law is not a bad thing. Instead, it's actually the ideal functioning of a state. In a Hungarian, rule of law means jogállamiság, which is not a fixed status or quality, but an ongoing objective for every civilized nation has to strive forwards. So actually, and this is the basis on which every member state agreed on when it joined the European Union. So this is a majestic concept, and what's really happening with the concept is the constant eroding of it, because the imperfection of this concept makes it a perfect political tool, and because there are no precise definition for the concept, or if we say there are at least 50 precise definitions. That means that if there anything to debate on, the politicians can breach in, and what I already said, the whole debate revolves now around this concept, and it is fought by politicians. Now, the problem is not really, so the problem is not the rule of law. I think the problem is how it is enforced in the European Union, and actually what you said, the implementation of these imperfect mechanisms.
Or lifting it, sorry. I mean, when the new Polish government came into office, it just evaporated.
Yeah, that was I been planning to tell you that back when the former government was in power in Poland, we could easily say that there are double standards. There are the good pupils of the European Union and the bad pupils, namely Hungary and Poland. But now we are talking about triple standards, because these countries with these governments with a rather federalist approach, or governments who are happily embrace federalism, are considered as good pupils. And actually, more absurdly, Hungary is under the effect of this conditionality mechanism. So obviously, we are the bad pupils now. But now we have Poland, who could easily escape this cage, this quarantine, all of a sudden when a federalist government came into power. But those accusations towards the mechanisms in Poland are still in effect. So nothing really been refurbished within 24 hours, but the political outcome supposes that. So again, what I want to say is that it's completely okay to have rule of law monitoring mechanisms, but if we have that, we should ensure that these mechanisms won't create a stage for triple standards, of double standards. It has to be a standardized approach, but it's highly unlikely that the administrative burden of that kind of mechanism would not be a match for this European bureaucracy, because, as Rodrigo said, there are plenty more problems in the European administration right now.
One more question regarding this. Do you think that the Brussels institutions have any such strict mechanism which stick them to the rules of the European Union, or if there's not any, shouldn't we invite one? I mean, member states.
Could you please repeat?
So what about the rule of law? Sometimes one has the feeling that in Brussels they are trying to push the boundaries.
So the problem with the conditionality mechanism is that it puts the European Commission in a place when it can play a judge dread, like being the prosecutor, the judge, and the executioner at the same time. And actually it lacks all the prerequisites of an ideal rule of law working, because there's not much to do with legal certainty and transparency, but it set the stage for the European Commission and the European bureaucracy to sanction these states, or Hungary, obviously, because we are the only country under the effect of the mechanism. So it's a really problematic regulation, and if we consider that how the revolving doors work around or between the European Commission and the European Court of Justice, we easily can find ourselves in a trap which slowly drifts towards unbalanced and unchecked federalism. Because what we see now is politicians playing lawyers and lawyers playing politicians, and that has nothing to do with the concept of the rule of law.
Thank you very much. Now, for reflections, yeah.
Just to react quickly to something that Gergo just said, that it's absolutely true. Revolving doors between the Commission and the European Court of Justice. Who is one of the judges of the court today? Mr. Leitenberger, former head of cabinet of Mr. Barroso, who has just been appointed the Dutch judge to the Court of Justice, Mr. Smulders, who was the head of CAB of Mr. Timmermans. I'm fine, have nothing against the head of CAB of Mr. Timmermans. But there is an obvious conflict of interest, but one that is so big that no one can really ignore, and it happens. And at the same time, the notion of conflict of interest is exactly the very question used by the Commission to sanction Hungarian universities. Hello? I mean, is there another word for triple standards that we could apply here? And so this is absolutely true. And again, it shouldn't happen. It should not happen. And it does. And just again to give another like legal detail about the conditionality mechanism, it's the only mechanism in the EU whereby the EU can adopt financial sanctions without a judicial review. Under the infringement mechanism, infringement procedure, you only apply financial sanctions once the court confirmed them. And with this one, it's totally the opposite. First you punish, and then you go to the court. I mean, this wouldn't happen if they find you on the street. But again, for students, because the Erasmus is is the case I follow very closely, it does happen. And just a little reminder as well to give you an idea of how unfair it is. As we speak, Russian students remain eligible for Erasmus. I repeat, Russian students remain eligible for Erasmus. Hungarian students from these 21 universities are not.
Yeah, and it's also, it seems to be a very effective political tool. So if you want to have like more pro-European students in Hungary, which they already are anyway, I think you should scrap the Erasmus opportunities from them. But it's just a malicious comment on my side. Bernadette, I think you also have quite a lot of thoughts about the rule of law thing.
Yeah, and maybe here, like going more concrete on the EU institutions, rule of law mismatch, because it is basically a mismatch currently. Very obviously, if we are seeing the mechanism of the rule of law that is applied on the member states right now, we pose the question that what is going on when seeing the member states and their activity. So seeing the revolving doors, I think it is really crucial to see that the current control mechanism just simply don't allow any kind of real control, and obviously not any control from the perspective of the rule of law. But what could be done? Obviously, we need something a bit like bringing more control above the EU institutions, but what kind of tool can be effective on this? And I think, because several times I have considered this question myself as well, I think that the way the EU established the current rule of law mechanism on the member states, it could be followed when controlling the EU institutions as well. Since how did it start? So we were just seeing some reports going on in the EP from politicians who are not even in the politics right now, Sophie 't Veld, whose party already, I think that evaporated almost in the Netherlands, or being very weak nowadays. And the idea of DRF pact, because that was the very beginning, having a democracy rule of law pacts and using this kind of light mechanism that if everything goes well, then one country gets a green, if there is a problem, an orange, if there is a greater problem, then a red. This has led us to the reporting system and the conditionality mechanism itself, because it was 't Veld who first introduced the idea that the rule of law reporting and the access to EU funding should be interlinked. And there was obviously, and there hasn't been obviously any kind of legal base from the treaty on that. And very obviously as well, the same thing, the same control or overview mechanism by reporting could be introduced on the EU institutions as well, and it would be very, very timely. Because we are seeing all these misuse of power, and the cordon sanitaire is really just one cherry on the pie, because below we can see even more technical problems very often, even power balance problems, conflict of interest problems, that any of them would be performed by any member state, then there would be at least an infringement mechanism, or later on a rule of law procedure, or at least a rule of law report on that member state. Seeing this, obviously there won't be any political willingness to introduce such mechanism on the EU institutions by all the political parties, but this is why I think it is crucial that patriots can come in, because patriots and European conservatives can have this joint effort to establish such a mechanism, in particular because without this we will see how fragmented the European Union is going to be. Mainly because for the member states it is simply just a no-go and a perfect example for double standards or even triple standards, that there are just not different level of standards set for the EU institutions depending on their political affiliation, but there is obviously a huge difference among the standards set for the member states and set for the EU institutions. And now we are, as I have said, just at the beginning of formal negotiations starting on the MFF. And when seeing the communication on MFF, one can find a sentence saying that no any money could be drawn from the EU budget in the future without the rule of law. And this is a very, very dangerous statement, because this shows how this political tool would be extended to any kind of EU funding. And this is obviously very, very problematic without having the same rule of law standard application above the member states. So this is why I truly believe that for the future, a conservative coalition should be set up to introduce such a mechanism, because without that, actually the distribution of powers would just enhance and make greater the differences between the member states and the level of the EU institutions.
Just a quick control question. So when they say no money whatsoever, so they are referring also to agricultural funds as well?
Yeah, that's my problem. Obviously, that's my problem, agricultural funds as well. And who knows what will be with this directly managed competitiveness fund that will be introduced by the EU. Because we're saying that no money, that means that really it's really no money. So, yeah, the problem is great.
Yeah, please.
If I can add something, you mentioned the rule of law reporting. So if anyone wants to know what's the problem with what's the real problem with the rule of law reporting, just check the footnotes of each report and compare them with the core text, because I won't spoil anything, but actually the logic of these reports is that what the European Commission makes on a yearly basis is that they write a core text where they make statements, and in the end of each and every statement there are footnotes with reference to NGOs that's been asked to comment on these statements, and I won't spoil anything, and actually I refer it to your curiosity, but I think the biggest problem with is that these NGOs are asked on a precise political motivation.
Thank you. I just wanted to also add another point. It's like, in case we have doubts at what type of funds or European funds can, be confiscated at one part or the other, the answer is probably if the Commission wants and if the EU wants, all of them. Look at the case of Poland. 137 billion euros were confiscated without being under the conditionality mechanism. What was the legal base? The so-called common provisions regulation, which is one regulation that big, even bigger than the other. I think it's 500 pages. With the Article 9, Paragraph 2, that is basically a poetry to a poem to ideology. So this one, and also the European semester. The European semester, as you well know in the room, is mostly soft law, and it gives recommendations, except that when it comes to confiscating money, recommendations suddenly become legally binding by art of magic, basically. Just one positive note, if you don't mind. One of the big successes of the European, of the presidency, of the Hungarian presidency, that was adopted by consensus, and we shouldn't forget it, and again, it's extremely important, is the accession of Romania and Bulgaria to Schengen. And it's true that, again, it was taken by unanimity, by consensus. It took a long time. It's true that for already 10 years, for example, Romania already had the clearance of the European Commission, the technical clearance. It took a long time, but at the end, it's such an important decision that it's better if it's taken by unanimity, I believe. And again, I think this is really the added value of how a specific country, in this case Hungary, did push a file with more like efficiency and creativity, because it's also in its own interest. So would have, for example, been another country that is very, very far, be it Spain or Sweden, being so efficient in managing this milestone? I don't know. But this is, again, also an evidence that there's still a lot to be done together in the European Union. Not everything is bad. But again, this complacency that the minister referred to is really enemy number one. So please, more efficiency, less ideology, and can we focus on the matters where you really have a political consensus in the room, because this is going to be implemented swiftly. The rest is only going to bring more division in times where we really don't need it.
Okay, we are like a good movie series when when it comes to the most exciting part. The time is up, but it's not completely up yet, because we will invite some questions from the audience as well. But I would just love to ask you to be succinct and in asking questions and also in answering them, because we are lagging behind. Yeah. Any questions? No, it's time to pepper Hungarians. So.
So hello, Alexander Stemp. I'm just wondering, in addition to all that you've been saying, which has been really interesting, any further thoughts on Germany in the last couple of days, elections, so forth and so forth? Any points of views about the last couple of days in Germany? Thank you.
Maybe we get one more question. If there is, we can answer in a bucket. Okay, if no, then an additional question from me. So again, very succinctly, what do you think is the most important task for the Hungarian government in the coming months to further this agenda? What is the key question? And please don't answer mega, which was very succinct last time and very funny. So just this one area, one topic, and also the question on Germany. So who would start at this point? Rodrigo, please.
On Germany, it happened a couple of hours ago. I would rather answer once we have a government. I mean, now, honestly, we don't know anything new. The results look very much like the polls we had. We know that the CDU is not very willing to have a coalition with AfD, and we don't know how a possible coalition is going to look like. What I found interesting is that some declarations of probably the next Chancellor, Merz, saying that yes, indeed, we have to fight for this Europe independence and autonomy, and it sounds a bit like, you know, like the strategic autonomy of President Macron, an idea that has not really been implemented ever since. So again, will now Germany be like the driving force towards the federalization of the European Union? This is the only question that I have in mind now. We are waiting for the composition of the government, and that's it. Honestly, we are like 1 minute after the results. We don't know. Please give us a government, and then we will probably have a better analysis. To answer your question, Tamás, migration, the Migration Pact. I think if there is now one file that is going to be a priority, is this one, the Migration Pact, and not to implement it, but probably to adapt it to the opinion of the huge majority of the voters. The implementation of the Migration Pact is going to be very slow, and again, it's not consensual. It has not really been consensual. It has been voted by qualified majority, true, but ever since we have more and more governments who are saying, please give me a break. And the best example of that is the Polish government. Today, the Polish government is basically the mascot, I mean, like the preferred student in the room of Brussels. And they can do whatever they like, they can infringe the rule of law, and they call it the restoration of the rule of law. And still on migration, the declarations of Prime Minister Tusk has been extremely tough. He said, I'm not going to implement it. So you have the Netherlands, Poland, Hungary, Italy is kind of waiting with the handbrake, but it's there. So I think if there is one political battle for this year is to make sure that is to basically even maybe question this Migration Pact. For me, it is obsolete before it has ever been implemented.
Thank you. Bernadette?
On Germany, well, I think that we should really analyze this also from the economic perspective, because I have fears that this is also bringing some more instability on that. I mean, the current result, and also that the most probably the coalition will continue the direction it was following beforehand. And this instability is also influencing the European Union itself, because the economic underperformance of Germany most probably will not be solved. And at the level of the EU, this is also maybe causing some kind of power changes, because there was the French-German tandem always influencing the European politics. And currently, seeing the governments being unstable, we have also felt that there is a certain level of instability of this tandem influencing the European Union's politics. But this is not definitely a bad thing, because maybe that can also create some room to maneuver for other also political forces to enhance a bit their power, and also seeing how, for instance, the migration question would be addressed in Germany, because that is crucial for the future. This is also why I agree with Rodrigo on the migration pact. However, I would say for Hungary the MFF, and also because this is not just the aim but also a tool, since the MFF should be voted under unanimity. So there is also a possibility to veto it. And about the MFF, negotiations also be as a power game, and this can also create some room for Hungary to negotiate on other things. And obviously bringing in the dimension of MFF that certain directions that seem to be set by the Commission should be stopped or transformed or rethinked, because without that we cannot see a proper budget for the future of the European Union. So I would say MFF for the future, and Germany we will see, but definitely some level of instability.
And Gergely, please.
For Hungary, the best option to survive these turbulent times as a sovereign state, I think, is to working on forming coalitions of like-minded countries that are willing to and committed to follow and enforce the words of the European founding treaties.
No, this was very succinct. So before I also share my views about Germany, of which I will have some mercy on you, I call it a day. Thank you very much for joining me this conversation. And do we have further technical information? Then I pass the floor to Lilian. Thank you very much for your attention.